Welcome into the Tech Ed Podcast. I am your host, Matt Kirkner. One of the things we are most proud of here at the podcast is bringing such a wide variety of perspectives to the world of STEM and technical education. We believe that education is best served when we listen first and then we figure out what to do. That is what today's conversation is going to be all about. The gentleman who's joining me today is somebody that I've known for decades. Actually, I met him back in the 1990s when I was on a career search, and he was kind enough to spend some time with me when he was involved with a pretty significant law firm here in the Midwest. He went on to become the chief executive officer and then the president and chief executive officer of that law firm. He spent time with Honeywell International working on the governmental relations side of things. He is very well known for the role that he has now. We will talk about that in a moment. But he also served as the U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic for several years. We are going to discuss all of these. Today, he serves as the president and CEO of the Lynde and Harry Bradley Foundation. He has deep roots in my home state of Wisconsin, as does that foundation. So let me begin first by welcoming to the studios of the Tech Ed Podcast, in person, by the way, here in Mequon, Wisconsin, Ambassador Rick Graber. Ambassador, it is such a pleasure to have you with us.
So much, Matt. Great to be with you.
What a tremendous and amazing career that you had, working in a number of different endeavors, as we talked about. But one of those, and most interestingly, perhaps, is in the governmental relations space and as the U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic. So let's start out with this. I've heard you talk about that role and just some of the fascinating things that took place while you were in that position. But for our audience's benefit, what does an ambassador do? Tell us about that.
It's a great job. I mean, it really was a fun 3 years for me and for our family. As United States ambassador, you are the senior representative in the country you're serving, in my case, the Czech Republic. We lived in the capital city of Prague during those 3 years. And your job is to promote America, to promote the United States in every way you can. Sometimes that means working with the government, the Czech government. So I had many meetings with the prime minister, with the president, with members of parliament. Sometimes it's working with your fellow diplomats. You have colleagues from all over the world serving in Prague. So there's work there. Worked a lot with in the business sector. In most embassies, there's a representative from the Department of Commerce. So you are helping U.S. companies navigate the landscape if they want to invest in a country like the Czech Republic or any other country. Sometimes you're encouraging Czechs to buy American, to look to American products, whether it's military products or industrial products. So it's a multifaceted role. You can pretty much do what you want with it. I thought there'd be more instruction from D.C. There really wasn't. So you can chart your own course, and it was very fun.
So this is obviously during the second George W. Bush.
The end of George W. Bush. So we were in Prague from 2006 to 2009.
Okay, so 3 years, and it had to be just a fascinating time. I mean, first of all, you're not doing this on your own, right? You have quite a significant staff as the ambassador.
Embassy staff was over 300 people.
Was it really?
About a third of which are Americans, and the Americans in any embassy come and go.
Okay.
Usually they're on 2 or 3 year stints from the State Department, from the Department of Commerce, from the Department of Defense, intelligence, of course, which was the most eye-opening part of the whole undertaking.
I can imagine,
anyway. And then 2/3 are Czech citizens.
Okay.
Folks. And that's the real institutional memory of any embassy, are the local employees. They're the ones that are there for decades. And I
Sure.
remain in touch to this day with
Do you really?
some of the employees there that have wonderful knowledge about their own country, of course, but care deeply about the United States.
Absolutely. So you're, and I've obviously wonderful people, and they're doing this for decade upon decade, and they have all this institutional familiarity and a lot of that. I'm sure a lot of the issues, in fact, it has to be almost obvious that a lot of the issues don't necessarily change from administration to administration, from ambassador
It's
to ambassador.
amazing how apolitical the job really is. You're supporting the country. And I mean, sure, policies change. Most of the job, most of the day-to-day work is talking about the United States, which is neither Republican nor Democrat or conservative or liberal.
Yeah, we could all use a reminder of that these days,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know you and I think a lot alike in that regard. I've heard you talk about where the ambassador lives in the Czech Republic. What can you tell us about that? I just thought that was fascinating.
The ambassador's residence in Prague, it has to be one of the finest properties owned by the United States government anywhere. It's a massive 100,000 square foot palace in just on the outskirts of downtown Prague, central city Prague. It was built by a Jewish family named Peček in the late 20s, 1930s. The family only lived there briefly. He was a wealthy banker, and then had to escape with all that was going on in Europe at that point in time.
Sure. So this is right before World War II, or
yes,
okay.
yes, and then occupied by Nazis, occupied by Soviets. No damage was really done. Ultimately, the United States ambassador during World War II, named Steinberg, leased the property. Shortly thereafter, the United States ended up buying the property for less than $1 million, and it was just an offset against debt. And ever since then, it's been the residence. And that's where the activities, the entertaining, the events happen at the residence, not at the embassy, which is not really built for those sorts of things. Amazing property. There have been some great former ambassadors that have lived there, including Shirley Temple Black, who was ambassador at the time of change. She was beloved in the Czech Republic.
I remember that. Was that in the 70s? Was that during the Ford administration, or when was that?
No, it would have been in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay, later than that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, just beloved. In fact, while I was there, somehow, some way, I got her phone number.
Okay.
And thought it would be just great fun to have her come visit. Because
Absolutely.
people loved her. It'd be great public diplomacy to bring her back.
Yeah.
So I called the number, and sure enough, Shirley Temple answered.
No way.
And talked to her. I thought I had her convinced, and then finally she said, "No, I'm just too old. I can't do this." And she didn't.
Sure.
Which is a great
But
shame.
you had an opportunity to
But
talk
just
to her.
fun
How cool is that?
opportunities like that. You think, wow, I'm talking to Shirley Temple.
Absolutely. Yeah, unbelievable. Do you have your family over there then when you're there?
Yeah, of course. My wife and our two boys. Our younger son went to high school in Prague,
Okay.
international school there, and it was a very rigorous program.
Was it?
Frankly, more rigorous than he was getting here in
Interesting.
Milwaukee.
Huh.
Our older son just started college, so we literally just dropped him off and took off for Prague and hoped it would work. And it did. He spent summers and holidays in Prague and had a great experience. So life-changing, wonderful experience. It went very, very fast.
I can imagine,
but
those
just,
3 years.
As I said, a life-changing opportunity.
So you get to talk to Shirley Temple. You have your family here in this beautiful 100,000 square foot historic residence, and I love old architecture.
Which you live in a very small part of.
Yeah,
but
I can
yes.
imagine. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't have a 20,000 square foot bedroom, I assume, but just absolutely beautiful. What are some of the key memories in addition to that you really reflect back on and best?
Oh, so many memories. Because of the missile defense, it got a lot of attention. We had a presidential visit, which is a big deal when the president of the United States comes to visit. And I will tell you, there's nothing more amazing than standing on foreign soil and watching Air Force One roll up.
Really?
Just amazing.
Yeah.
Secretary of State Rice, Condoleezza Rice came, Secretary of Defense Gates came, many members of Senate and House of Representatives, so lots of political visits. We had a couple-day visit from Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor after she had retired. And I remember there was a dining room upstairs at the residence, sitting there with her, talking about her interview with Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
What it was like to be a justice, and a female justice.
Right.
At that. Amazing experience. There are wonderful days every May. They're called Liberation Days that happen all around the country, celebrating the freedom of Czechoslovakia from the Germans after World War II. Patton's army was responsible for that. And they have amazing celebrations in little towns celebrating America. The biggest one is in a city called Pilsen, which is at about an hour west of Prague. And this whole town shows up for America. And you just don't see this
Right.
too often anymore.
Or certainly don't hear about it.
And in the middle of this town of Pilsen, there are two monuments. They're identical. One says, "Thank you, America."
Huh.
And the other one says, "Diki Ameriki," which is the same thing.
Okay.
You, America.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's got to make you incredibly proud to be an American when you're there, right?
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And then, just as memorable, I think, as all the visits from dignitaries, were just the visits to small town. I tried to get out of Prague as often as I could, meet with local mayors and meet with local people. Often they spoke no English, but it's amazing how you can communicate with a little bit of help and make a connection with these people. And that's where you learn about country. It's not so much in the capital city where everyone's speaking English. It's when you get out.
Yep.
No different in this country or in this state.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here we are in flyover country. It's there's a lot to learn from the areas that not everybody gets to. Have you been back to the Czech Republic?
No, a lot.
Yeah.
We go back a lot.
Have
Try
you?
to get back at least every couple of years. Still have many friends there. And it's always great to land back in Prague and see the sights. And we can do things now that we couldn't do then. It's a little bit of a surreal life. You have someone driving you around, staff and all that. And now we take the public metro system and subway system and trams and can explore the city in a different way than when you
Absolutely.
live
Yeah, you're just Rick and you can go where you please and
wherever we want.
I like it. So I have to believe, obviously the career that you've had, the time in the Czech Republic, your time, working on the governmental relations side for Honeywell International. We talked about some of the great memories. What are some of the lessons? What are the things you've carried with you into the work you're doing now that you learned during that time of your career?
No, I think the thing I gained most from time with Honeywell and working for the State Department was just a greater appreciation for this country. I mean, particularly with the Czechs, when you're living there day to day and you just see it, we don't realize in this country how much people look to the United States for leadership, how they look to the United States for what to do next. We take that for granted. The United States has to lead. The United States has a responsibility. I argue that we're not doing so well these days, but it is certainly there. And then just the exceptional nature of this country, the unique nature of this country. With Honeywell, I traveled all over the world. I've worked all over the world. So you see a lot of different cultures, a lot of different ways of doing things. There's something special about the United States. I looked at philanthropy and charity, this notion that is all built into our DNAs in this country of volunteering, whether it's time or resources. This doesn't come naturally in other cultures. It just doesn't. I remember when I was ambassador, I thought it would be fun for the embassy as a whole team to go somewhere and volunteer for a morning somewhere.
Yeah.
So you guys decide. We'll go wherever you think it makes the most sense. It was like pulling teeth.
Really? People didn't recognize that was...
And we finally ended up planting trees in a forest, national park in the mountains of Czech Republic to the north. And it was a wonderful day, but boy, it was hard getting people to think about taking some of the time away.
Yeah,
To
interesting.
do something.
Well, and you just
And
think
it's just not natural.
Yeah, well, and you think about, some of those things that are woven into our culture, and I, obviously volunteerism for so many of us is it's just a way of life. It's almost an expectation here in the United States, and to see that that isn't endemic in other parts of the world, that's a fascinating observation. As you know, I'm a huge fan of free enterprise, which I think is another thing that's really unique to our country, or at least to several companies into the West in many cases, but. It just the huge benefit that we have of a capitalistic economy, of the ability to chart your own course, to take risk, to benefit from that risk. We were at the Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce had their Manufacturer of the Year awards banquet. It was probably 2 or 3 months ago here in Wisconsin, and they honored Ron Wanek, who's the founder of Ashley Furniture Industries, by putting them in their Manufacturing Hall of Fame. He gave a speech on free enterprise at that acceptance that was it was so incredibly moving. And our 22-year-old daughter was actually in the audience with us. She just graduated from UW-Madison, is starting a job here this fall. And she was like, I wish every one of my classmates at University of Wisconsin-Madison could have heard that defense of free enterprise and all the good that comes out of it. And he talked about volunteerism, and he talked about philanthropy. And I think we have this connection in so many cases between free enterprise, between private business, between economic success, and giving back and supporting really, really important causes. And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation now. Certainly, people who were no strangers to free enterprise were Lynde and Harry Bradley here in Milwaukee. I was just in a meeting yesterday at MSOE that was founded in 1903, and I said, by the way, so was Harley Davidson, so was Alan Bradley. So an incredibly important year for the state of Wisconsin and for Southeast Wisconsin. But let's talk a little bit about who those individuals were. In full disclosure, I think our audience knows for 10 years of my career, I ran a Rockwell Automation spinoff. So they spun off their private contract manufacturing or contract finishing business. I was part of their business. They spun it off into a private company in the early 90s, and I had the honor of being CEO of that business for 10 years. So I know quite a bit about the history of Alan Bradley. But for our audience, tell us about who Lynde and Harry were.
Lynde and Harry were two brothers that grew up on the east side of Milwaukee. They grew up on Prospect Avenue in the early 1900s. Father was not too involved in their lives. Their mother used their Prospect Avenue home as a boarding house to raise money. Neither one of them graduated from high school. They had to try to make ends meet in other ways. But they were real thinkers. They were interested, especially Lynde, who was the older brother, got a patent when he was 16 years old. Again, with no formal education whatsoever. And he started tinkering around, and he was playing with controllers that make motors speed up and slow down. That was his original idea. And boy, they had rough times. I mean, they'd go years with almost no sales, just it stops and starts and almost successes and then setbacks. But finally, it started coming around as you approach World War I. Lynde asked Harry to join him in the business, but again, they still had some problems and got involved with a corrupt partner from Michigan, and again, they almost tanked. But ultimately, they were incredibly successful. Interesting little story about Alan Bradley. Do you know who Alan is?
Yes, you don't.
His name is Dr. Stanton Allen,
Okay.
who contributed $1,000 to Lynde Bradley
Wow.
in his efforts.
Huh.
And
That's
for
awesome.
that $1,000, Dr. Allen got top billing.
Well, yeah, and now on every single PLC, every single variable frequency drive, every single control right on the building, that's a pretty good investment in legacy.
Then ultimately the company
Yeah.
took off. The Bradley brothers they loved me. They were very involved in the city, contributed. Different personalities. Lynde Bradley was, I think, an introvert in many ways, quiet, stuck to his innovations
Sure.
and things like that.
Yeah,
Harry Bradley, I think, was the life of the party.
interesting.
So very different, but I think they were close. Lynde Bradley passed away in 1942, Harry Bradley in 1965. My current employer, the Bradley Foundation, didn't come into existence until 1985, so long after Lynde and Harry are gone, when the company was sold to Rockwell. My guess is they wouldn't have been thrilled with that.
With the sale?
I mean,
Yeah. Was it
they're-
3 heirs or were there a bunch of them of that? Because it stayed in the family, right?
A lot of the money did. There were a couple other shareholders. Fred Luck was a friend of theirs that ultimately ran the day-to-day business. And interestingly enough, when Alan Bradley sold to Rockwell, the money that funded today's Bradley Foundation did not come from either of the brothers. It came from the wife of Fred Luck.
Oh, did it really?
Margaret Luck.
Wow.
If you look at the Milwaukee School of Engineering buildings, you'll see a Margaret Luck
Got it.
residence hall.
Huh.
That's who that is.
That's great
And
history.
It
I love that.
was her $250 million, which in 1985 was a whole lot of money.
Huge amount of money.
Uh,
Still today
still
is
a lot of money
Yeah.
that funded what is today the Bradley.
That's unbelievable. So the first observation I want to make, we talk so often on this podcast, Rick, about the different options that people should have coming out of high school, right? And I'm the product of a 4-year degree. Make no apologies for that. It worked out fine, but you think about students going into the military. You think about students going into a 2-year college, a community or technical college, going direct to the workforce, going on to a 4-year degree and beyond if that's what they choose to do and that's what their career choice demands. But here are just two young people who never even graduated from high school that built one of the most iconic brands. It's certainly in manufacturing and automation. Is there a lesson buried there? Do you think?
People that don't necessarily have 4-year degrees. graduate degrees that make a success of themselves. There's a lot we don't know about the brothers and what they thought about. But one thing is totally clear, is that they cared deeply about free enterprise and limited government and just giving people a chance to do what they want. And in their case, they almost fail more than once, but then ultimately succeed beyond their wildest dreams. And that's what they cared. They thought that we need a strong civil society with volunteer organizations solving problems. They believed in an informed citizen. They thought that was an important part of the American success story. And it really does inform a lot of our K-12 grant making to this day and higher education grant making because they believe in it. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean everyone can and should go to college. You got to follow your course. You got to follow your passions. You got to follow your dreams. There's dignity in every single person. In today's world, we get so hung up on race and sex and all these other things. We've lost track of the fact that we're American. Opportunity, and we live in the most amazing country ever created. We should celebrate.
Yeah, we should celebrate that indeed. I know you spend a lot of time celebrating that in terms of the work that you do at the Bradley Foundation and certainly furthering that goal. I love the idea of every human being having dignity, of living in a country where there is still so much opportunity. And I think more opportunity than a lot of times we recognize, and a lot more opportunity than a lot of times we're messaging to our young people. So I know we're going to get into the whole topic of education, but from a broader perspective, just tell us a little bit about the mission of the Bradley Foundation and the work that you're doing.
In a sentence, the mission of the Bradley Foundation is to restore, strengthen, and protect the principles and institutions of American exceptionalism. So we try to figure out what that means and how the Bradley brothers would approach that. I think they would agree with the mission statement without question. The hard part then becomes as a board and as a staff, what do you do with that? We went through a strategic planning process 7-8 years ago, and we concluded that there are really 4 main things that the brothers would have supported. First, our constitutional order. That means separation of power. It means federalism. It means our individual liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And we support organizations that promote constitutional order. Clearly, free markets, entrepreneurs, limited government, let people succeed and fail, things we've talked about at some level. We've also talked about civil society. It's sort of the intangible glue in this country that hold things together. Neighborhoods, churches, it's schools, volunteer organizations of all sorts, and every community in this country has. We support lots and lots of organizations in the Milwaukee area and throughout Wisconsin that you've never heard of, that are doing amazing things every day to make people's lives better. Bradley Brothers believe that the arts were part of it. We support the arts. The largest grant the Bradley Foundation has ever made is to the new Bradley Symphony Center in downtown Milwaukee, the ballet, theater, so forth. So that's the third. The fourth is an informed citizen. We touched on that too. Again, the brothers thought that there's an obligation as a citizen of this country to inform yourself, to be educated in whatever way you want to do that. And that has really led to our decades-long support of parental choice and education in Milwaukee and across the country, as well as the work we do with higher education in a very, very targeted way. We don't just give money to universities across the country. We do it in a very targeted way, in a way that the brothers would. So I've learned in this world of philanthropy that it's not like working for a company or a law firm or government. It's harder to measure success. You have to be patient. We've been funding parental choice in education for almost 40 years, and that experiment is still ongoing and will continue to be ongoing. So it's different in that sense. We're looking for people that fit into one or more of those buckets I talk about, but you don't always know if you're making the right call. You're making a bet on people, which I guess isn't all that different than anything else. You're looking for people that are so motivated to make a difference in our society, that we're prepared to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what we're looking for.
Well, that's what having a mission is all about, right? Is that when you're part of something
When we're
that's
trying to change the world, that's hard.
It
It's
is,
not going to happen in a
right.
quarter.
We say we're securing the American dream for the next generation of STEM and workforce talent.
Exactly. You're doing the same
It's
thing.
important work. It is hard to measure, and I think that is a true differentiator. All my time in manufacturing and in business, there's a lot of different ways to measure a business, whether
A
it's
scorecard.
yeah, exactly.
Look at the P&L statement and see how you're doing.
Right. And it's not to say that there aren't some tangible things that we can measure in terms of philanthropic work and results. And I think that's important, but it's also a little bit of a feel and a trust as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
So when you're betting on people, what do you look for?
Bradley Foundation, I think, does its philanthropy a little bit different than many. Many philanthropists are very prescriptive, here's how we want it done. We don't, the Bradley Foundation. We're not necessarily looking for the fanciest report coming back. Some of the organizations, small organizations, several city organizations, aren't equipped to give you a PowerPoint. Some don't necessarily have great management skills. We're looking for passion, looking for someone who's willing to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take a call. So whether it's working with homeless people or housing or issues like that, or policy issues, there's also a lot of what we do. You're just looking for that passion. And of course, you're looking at a high level for consistency with our mission. The hard part of what we do is we have to say no more than we say yes in terms of number of grants that we're able to make. Resources still are limited, but it's that leader of an organization. Sometimes we say we're looking for chefs, not restaurants.
Yeah, great. I love that. And that really drives it back to the people. And I thought it was interesting, Rick, that you said that some of these are organizations that nobody's ever heard of. I would love for you to think about what is one of those organizations that almost nobody knows about that you're supporting that's doing really, really important.
Some are a little bit larger organizations here in the Milwaukee area. Organization called Running Rebels.
Sure.
So you've heard of Running Rebels.
Absolutely. I drove by their building yesterday, actually. They're up on like 6th and North or so, maybe a little bit north of that.
It's really driven by two people, Victor and Don Barnett.
Okay.
Have made their life work helping youth get through the youth, often coming out of the juvenile justice system.
Yep.
He finally has a building that has a gym in it, which he never had.
I didn't realize that.
Started out as just using basketball as a way to get these kids refocused.
Sure.
But they've done amazing work. A place called Axe House in the Milwaukee area, they're helping people become homeowners, oftentimes for the first time. They'll help them get a mortgage. They require some sweat equity into homes. They're now actually acquiring some homes for resale to people, but there are some streets in this city that are in pretty tough areas that are all owned now instead of rented. And it makes a huge difference when you own your own house. And interestingly enough, the original theory, and it's true, is that the rent they were paying is almost always more than the mortgage.
If people take care of the houses, care about the neighborhood.
That they're making, and they're building equity over time.
And they're building equity over
They
time.
work very closely with a school on the north side called St. Mark's. Again, does tremendous work. It's really tough factor.
Right.
Great leader.
Absolutely.
Ex-Housing has a great leader, guy named Mike Gospel, former lawyer. Serenity Inn, a small place on the north side that helping guys with addiction. Do you? They have their dinners. They have their dinners every week. You just get together.
I volunteered there. I did. Well, I don't anymore, but I did several
people in
times.
the newspaper.
Exactly.
Or on TV, and they're not the fanciest places on earth, but boy, they're making a difference. And it's not a government program that's changing those people's lives. It's an organization like that, which is, again, part of what's unique about this country. These organizations are everywhere. We're talking about organizations in Milwaukee, but they're everywhere.
Yeah, I'll tell you just a couple stories. The first one related to St. Marcus, actually. I had told the story about my daughter. I'll tell a story about my son. who for his Eagle Scout project, and he's now well into his 20s, I think, lives in Washington, D.C. now, but for his Eagle Scout project, he wanted to do a project where he would teach young people how to ride their bikes. And what he did was he partnered with an organization called Dream Bikes, who I'm sure you're familiar with in Milwaukee, that refurbishes bikes and then gives them to underserved communities. And he partnered with St. Marcus, and they ran an event on a Saturday, and dozens and dozens of kids from all over that neighborhood, which for our audience is kind of on the eastern edge of what we might call our central city here in Milwaukee, came and learned how to ride their bike. So he had Boy Scouts volunteer to teach them how to ride the bike. And then when the young person got done learning how to ride the bike, if their parents were there, my son would go over and say, he would say, he would talk to the parents first, and then we'd go back to the kid, and he would say, do you like the bike that you just learned to ride on? And if the kid said yes, and the parents said it was okay, they would give that young person that bike. So they came to learn how to ride a bike, and they would walk away with a beautifully refurbished bike, and that was all in partnership with St. Marcus. And there again, one of those things that nobody really knows about, nobody made a huge deal about, but just in really, really small ways, changing lives. So certainly the support that your organization has of an organization like St. Marcus, which is just a terrific school, and giving students, at least an alternative and a choice in terms of what their educational pathway is. Just a great example of the work that you do. And I will just say, a lot of times, and we get maybe poisoned by the media on both ends of the spectrum, but when you think about organizations, advocating for constitutional order, advocating for free enterprise and free markets and so on, you don't necessarily think about all these great things that flow from that. And I think it's important for you to make sure that you're taking adequate credit for that incredible difference that you make.
Steward of this wonderful gift to Milwaukee and the country. Well, the Bradley brothers probably wouldn't have been thrilled with the sale of Allen Bradley. I think they'd be very proud of the legacy that they have left on our community and our country, and that the Bradley family.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an incredible legacy, an incredible impact in terms of preparing that next generation of STEM and workforce talent. As we like to say, to secure the American dream for the next generation. That's our mission here at the podcast. Would love, Rick, for you to tell me, if you think about what is the American dream? We talk about that all the time. Maybe means a little bit different things to different people. When you hear those words, the American dream, what does that mean to you?
Opportunity to succeed. The American dream is not a guarantee of success in any way, but the opportunity to succeed beyond your wildest dreams is the American dream, and it is still possible in this country. Now, if you don't have access to a good education, it's hard. It's kind of a prerequisite. It's almost a moral and civil right, it seems. And to me, it means being able to pursue something that does not get all entangled in government regulation, top-down thinking. It's a bottom-up spirit that I think exists. What you have in this country, I think there's no substitute for hard work. Anyone can find help and mentorship. It seems to me, get that education one way or another, and happily those opportunities are greater than they've ever been in this city and in any city around the country. Have a dream. Have a plan, have a goal, and work to achieve that. And expect a couple failures along. Be a little patient. It doesn't happen instant. Careers take a long time. They take lots of twists and turns. You've had them. I've had them. My career path turned out much differently than I would have predicted. You see an opportunity, go for it, understanding that you might make the wrong decision, but you'll have an opportunity to correct. Focus, it's hard work. And you can get there.
Absolutely, you can get there. It's a great message. I love that you're starting out with finding a mentor, find a role model. The one thing that I never say no to, and so many people, yourself included, were so kind, early in my career, taking time to
I mean, that's fun.
Right, it is fun. And I just never, I never say no to somebody who asks for help. in that regard. I'm going to say probably never say no to anybody who asks for help, but it's specifically a young person who's trying to figure out their way through what their path should be, whether it's through education, whether it's through their career.
Someone in your school, someone in your church, someone in your neighborhood.
Right. Exactly. So find a mentor, find a role model, ask for help, pursue your education, have a dream that's out there on the horizon, and be willing to put the hard work in toward that dream. I think that's really, really good advice. I want to ask you one more advice question, Rick, as we close out our time today on the Tech Ed podcast. And it's a question we pose to every single guest that we have, and we absolutely love the answers to this particular question. I want you to go all the way back in time, before you're running the Bradley Foundation, before you're U.S. ambassador to the Czech Republic, before your time as a really successful attorney, and certainly as a clerk in the same firm that you ended up leading one day. Let's go all the way back to that 15-year-old Rick Graber, and if you could tell that young man one thing, what would that thing be?
Some of the same things we just talked about. It's be focused, be yourself. I think at points during anyone's lifetime and anyone's career, you try to be something or do something that you're not. Be yourself and succeed being yourself with your own ideas and your own passions and your own style. Some people are going to be quieter than others. Some people are just going to go about things in different ways. Be yourself. You have a better chance at succeeding. Doing be patient, be focused, be willing to take a risk or two, and almost certainly good things will happen.
Absolutely perfect advice, and certainly the whole idea of being yourself, and in terms of whatever your personal philosophy is, whatever your passions are, whatever your ideas are, the whole idea of patience, and I agree with that. I mean, I was very early in my career really impatient.
Me too.
I think that's natural, and maybe that leads to some level of success, but
said some things I regret.
Right. Yeah, haven't we all? There's no question about that. Fortunately, I'm not judged by every single thing I've said over the course of the time I've had on Earth. But the whole idea of being genuine, being yourself, I can tell you this is the genuine, authentic Ambassador Rick Graber that joined us today. Speaks his mind, really, really deep thinker, as our audience can tell, and just doing some amazingly good things, not just for my hometown of Milwaukee, for the state of Wisconsin, but really across the country and around the globe. Can't thank you enough, Ambassador, for taking some time with us today. Thanks so much for being with us on the Tech Ed Podcast. That was a truly enjoyable episode with Ambassador Rick Graber, doing so many great things with the Bradley Foundation. Really appreciate the Ambassador stopping into the podcast studio, spending some time with us here at the Tech Ed Podcast. Lots of interesting things came up. If you want to learn more about that discussion, head on over and check out the show notes. You will find them at techedpodcast.com/Graber. That is techedpodcast.com/GRABER. As always, do not forget to check us out on social media. We are everywhere you consume your social media. We are on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Wherever it is that you go, we will be there. Be sure to connect. We would love to hear from you at the Tech Ed Podcast. Until next week, I am your host, Matt Kirkner. Thank you for being with us.